Hi world, it's Saturday the 13th of June, late in the day UK time. Probably not going to post this for a few hours yet, probably going to wait until the moon moves into Aries in a few hours time. But this is a video on the horoscope of Brazil and its charming president, Jair Bolsonaro. It's going to start off dry, bit of a basic astrology, and then it's going to get more interesting towards the end. Brazil, there's two charts in existence for Brazil. For the first one, I'm indebted to the English astrologer Nick Campion and his Book of World Horoscopes, who did the initial research that the Brazil declared independence from Portugal on the 7th of September 1822. And the declaration was signed somewhere between 4 and 5 p.m. on the 7th of September 1822 in Ipiranga in Brazil. Now, most astrologers outside of Brazil have sort of settled for the midpoint between 4 and 5 and made it 4:30. Brazilian astrologers use 4:43 p.m. on that day. The difference is, there's a difference here. Regardless of the time, Brazil's horoscope for 1822 is that of a Virgo sun with the moon in Gemini. If it's at 4:30 in the afternoon, then it's got Aquarius rising. If it's at 4:43 in the afternoon, then it's got Pisces rising. And I kind of feel that Brazil's a bit more Aquarius rising than it is Pisces rising. Although it's spent a lot of time in suffrage and under the rule of dictatorial and tyrannical despots, military rule, dictators, it's still kind of a futuristic country, and I just got this feeling it's a bit more Aquarius than it is Pisces. Brazilian astrologers out there prove me wrong. Now, there's also a horoscope, a more contemporary horoscope for Brazil that I've done from my own research based on, and I don't have a time for this, midday on the 5th of October 1988, based in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, which is the latest constitution of Brazil. And I spent a bit of time studying that, sad person that I am. And that makes a more contemporary version is that Brazil is a Libra with Leo moon. But I kind of veer towards the 1822 and independence, because that's when Brazil became a sovereign country, regardless of whether it's a democracy or a dictatorship. And using that chart, it's pretty clear to me that Brazil has been and is going through a lot of change. For a start off, in Brazil's birth chart, it was born in September 1822 with Pluto at 0 degrees of Aries, square to the conjunction of Uranus and Neptune at 2 and 3 degrees of Capricorn, all of these outer planets being retrograde. So there's always been an element of turmoil and subterfuge and behind the scenes manipulation and power struggles, and that seems to be kind of written into Brazil's history, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it doesn't seem as if it's possible for Brazil to get away from that until it kind of sheds its past, and whether that will happen or not, I don't know. Brazil's chart does have the strong conjunction of the moon and Jupiter in Gemini in the 4th house. And that's lovely because that gives it a sense of humour, the ability to take the mickey out of itself. It gives an outward looking perspective, as well as being strongly rooted in terms of national pride. So there's a lot of positives in Brazil's chart as well. The sun in the 7th house only makes a fairly weak trine to Saturn. Now, what's really interesting is the current bout of transits, and to a lesser extent the current bout of progressions in Brazil's chart with what's going on for it right now. In terms of the progressed chart, the progressed sun in Brazil's chart is at 3 degrees of Aries. Over the last 3 years, it has conjuncted Brazil's natal Pluto, and squared Brazil's natal Uranus and Neptune. And that square to Uranus is still going on and will be for the next 5 or 6 months. Also, in Brazil's progress chart, progress Sun and progress Mars are together at 3 degrees of Aries, squaring natal Uranus in Brazil's chart. So it seems to me that there's a great deal of ongoing turmoil in Brazil from an astrological perspective, and that this is probably going to last until almost the end of this year. Also in Brazil's chart, the progressed moon, which removes 1 degree a month, is currently at 6 degrees of Virgo and will pass on top of Brazil's sun in about 8 months, 7 to 8 months from now, suggesting then that as the progressed sun and progressed Mars move away from conflict, the progressed moon hits Brazil's sun, and that should bring in something new, a fresh start, a new beginning towards the end of this year and the very start of next. Add to this that at this time, Uranus in the sky is on top of Brazil's Saturn at 9 degrees of Taurus and will be until March of next year. Any combination of Uranus and Saturn is conflict prone. They don't like each other. But when it's the natal Saturn and transiting Uranus, then there's a sense of revolutionizing one's limitations, changing of one's boundaries from concrete and steel to rubber and elastic. And it does seem as if there's some type of big change brewing over the next 6 to 8 months. Uranus is very much the factor here. Uranus in the sky on top of Brazil's Saturn, and the progressed Sun and progressed Mars in Brazil's chart squaring the natal Uranus. So revolution and change is in the air. Now, when I bring into this the horoscope of that nice Mr. Bolsonaro, who was born on the 21st of March 1955 at 2:45 in the afternoon in Glicério, in Sao Paulo district, 21 degrees 23 north, 21 degrees 23 minutes south, and 50 degrees 12 minutes west. This is his chart. You can't make it up. His sun is at 0 degrees of Aries, exactly conjunct Brazil's Pluto. His ascendant is at 23 degrees of Cancer, and his natal Uranus is at 23 degrees of Cancer. So he was born with the exact conjunction of Uranus on the ascendant, and his sun is conjunct Brazil's Pluto and square Brazil's Neptune and Uranus. He was born on a void moon. The moon in his chart is at 28.5 degrees of Aquarius, opposite Pluto but void. With Uranus on his ascendant, he's always going to be a divisive character. There's nothing gentle, empathic, compassionate, spiritual about this man. He's always seeing himself as a radical, a revolutionary, someone who's dragging his country forward into the future, kicking and screaming, and he will always do it in a direct and assertive way. Similar to one or two other right-wing presidents, dictators, he's stepping back from the world stage at this time so as not to be associated with the economic downturn caused by coronavirus, and he's very much an advocate that coronavirus is just a little bit of flu, and he wants his country to open up, even though it is the most ravaged country in the world by coronavirus after the US of A. What's fascinating from my perspective, from an astrological perspective, is that as we speak, both Jupiter and Pluto are opposite Bolsonaro's ascendant and Uranus on the ascendant. And Uranus in the sky for the next 9 or 10 months is on top of Bolsonaro's midheaven. So I can't help but assume that in the short term, his methodology, his antics and his ways of working are going to become ever more angular, sharp, probably militaristic. Yes, no, black, white. Pluto opposite his ascendant and Uranus on his midheaven at this time is not given to focus groups and sitting down and talking to people and finding compromises. It is given to sharp, specific actions that will make or break his long-term future. Mars is about to pass on his Sun. Now, it does seem it's never easy to say. It's never easy to predict futures for politicians. It's a fool's game, and I've done it so many times. I've got it right, but I've also got it wrong. So I'm not going to go here, but I am going to say that with Pluto opposite his ascendant and Uranus on his midheaven, and with the hardcore radical attitude of his birth chart, he was also born, just for added insult, he was born with Mars in the sky opposite his Saturn, both squaring his Venus. So I would not describe him as a women's libber or a gender balancer. He's quite traditional in certain ways, particularly towards the role of women, I suspect. I do not see him as a futuristic, forward-looking president. I see him as someone who wants to stick to tried and trusted methods and who wants to have his way no matter what. Because of this, he is either going to become a president for life or he's no longer going to be in power. The nature of his horoscope and the nature of the times that he's operating under at the moment suggests that there is no middle ground, there is no soft option. It will be all or nothing. And this will conclude by the time that Pluto has finished with his ascendant, which will be around November, December of this year, and Uranus finishes with his midheaven by January of next year, January, February, by which time the progressed moon in Brazil's chart will be on its Sun. And the progressed Sun and progressed Mars would have cleared Brazil's Uranus and Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. But Bolsonaro is linked to Brazil with his Sun exactly on top of Brazil's Pluto. He's such a catalyst, he's such an agent of change. And it could be in a term of transformation, regeneration and rebirth in the highest possible way. It could equally be in terms of fascist dictatorship and authoritarian, totalitarian, militaristic. But Pluto doesn't take prisoners, and Pluto doesn't do things by half measure. So I personally think that Brazil is heading into an ever more concentrated time of radical change, and I do expect big developments one way or another by the end of this year, with a hope and a view that by the time we're into February, March of next year, Brazil is going to be in a much clearer space and there's going to be a lot more clarity about its long-term future. I wish it well.